Okay, today we are reviewing the case Curtis Dolores, um, the appellants versus the Sioux City Community School District and the Western Hills AEA. This case was heard on appeal by Administrative Law Judge Larry Bartlett on October 9th, 1992. Just some background on the case. Curtis, the young man in question, was a 13-year-old Native American student who had moved to the Sioux City School District in 1991 from Nebraska. When he first arrived in Sioux City, he attended the Irving School. By December of 91, he had been withdrawn from Irving and transferred to Woodrow Wilson Middle School. Um, his previous testing and IEP information that was transmitted from Nebraska indicated that Curtis had normal intellectual functioning, but did have some problems in academic areas. In specific, um, were the kind of areas of um, language, reading, and mathematics. In 91, after transferring to Woodrow Wilson, he was placed in an LD resource teacher program for reading and math. Um, During that transition, his IEP was misplaced, and so he wasn't at that time receiving the necessary supports until a few weeks after his placement at Woodrow Wilson. So there's a little bit of gap there in that information. Um, After being transferred to Woodrow Wilson, a psychological services report was conducted by the AEA. A couple of things were noted in that report. First of all, Curtis's did display some poor behavior, especially in unstructured situations. Some of the behaviors that were noted were bullying, defiance, extortion, and poor attendance. The report recommended a more restrictive special class for Curtis with integration. Also, that he regularly see a counselor and receive positive feedback on assignments and behavior. However, the record doesn't indicate that many of these um, recommendations were actually followed up on um, for any extended period of time. In addition to the psychological report that was conducted, a child study team issued a contrary report, actually concluding that Curtis's social functioning was just fine. Um, and so those conflicting reports created some problems temporarily. The school, however, when dealing with discipline, tended to agree more with the psychological services summary that was conducted on behalf of Curtis. By December 19th of 1991, a program review occurred. These are conducted every 3 years, and a new IEP was prepared for Curtis. The people who were present were the associate principal, the resource teacher, and an AEA rep. Curtis's mother was not present. District records indicate that she was invited to the IEP meeting. However, that is disputed in the record. But later, a copy of the IEP was actually mailed to her. Um, Something that's kind of important and of note: no IEP goals or objectives were addressed in terms of discipline concerns when it came to Curtis and within his IEP. The IEP really only addressed much of the same academic difficulties that Curtis had. Immediately after the development of the IEP, Curtis's behavior started to deteriorate into a series of incidents that take place from um, basically late December of 91 through the 1992 school year. Several suspensions occurred, some in school suspensions, some out of school suspensions for a variety of different behaviors, um, both in school, during the school day, before school, um, pretty much just occurring semi regularly. From 92 to March of 1993, Curtis was suspended for 13 days of in school suspension and at least 13 days of out of school suspension. but these testimony and records are inconsistent. There's several different accounts. Curtis's mother's accounts, some of the accounts of the AEA, and also the Juvenile Court Services um, contest really how often Curtis was suspended, and many of the Sioux City School District records were incomplete. Several meetings during that time period occurred between um, Curtis's mother, Dolores, as well as school officials, primarily the assistant principal. Um, During those conversations, different decisions were made regarding some of the trouble issues that Curtis had with his behavior, as well as some of his attendance problems that he was experiencing as well. However, there was no review done regarding the IEP. The administrative law judge did find that Curtis was suspended 45 and a half days of out of school involuntary exclusion and 58 and a half days of exclusion, including in school suspension, where it's highly unlikely that Curtis received any special education services during that time period. So, really, nearly 2 months worth of school days. If you break it down into actual um, school months, probably even closer to 3 months in which he was excluded from the school day process. Um, some of the interventions or suggestions by the assistant principal, and these are of note. Inpatient psychiatric treatment. Um, this was something that was listed within kind of the synopsis of the case itself. A few times and on a few different occasions, it's pretty well indicated that the assistant principal had kind of placed some undue pressure on Curtis's mother to have him admitted into inpatient psychiatric care, and even at one time had um, gave her the impression that if she didn't do this, that Curtis couldn't be returned to school, which actually resulted in some of the long-term exclusions a little later on, especially in the months of April and May, where there was some pretty deep miscommunication as to why or where or how Curtis was attending school. The other one that was kind of bizarre and strange was the option of Indian boarding school that was presented to Curtis's mother, most likely because of his ethnic background being Native American, which the administrative law judge actually comments pretty strongly against during the decision process, which he kind of talks about and lambasts against the idea of using this as how he refers to it as a means of dumping Curtis into somebody else's, basically into their school or into their lap, so that they don't have to actually try to address his problems. The administrative law judge, Mr. Bartlett, had actual pretty significant record of dealing with Indian boarding schools and an understanding of how they operate, and comments in there that anybody who did any like legitimate research would never recommend putting a special ed student in this type of a boarding school. The appellant position, Dolores Kay contended that her disabled son was unilaterally excluded from school by the Sioux City School District and as a result was denied FAPE. And the decision that was rendered by the administrative law judge, the appellant claims were upheld as a result. The district had to complete the following requirements. Just something of note also, the local AEA was also named in this case, and they were required to take part in some of these actions as well as some separate actions. The first, though, to be completed by the school was to redesign the IEP immediately. Um, Also, to provide written and oral notice of all discipline taken against Curtis within 48 hours of that discipline actually occurring. Also, to plan and execute compensatory education program, keeping in mind that Curtis was excluded from nearly 60 days of school. And finally, to plan and provide an adequate and appropriate counseling for Curtis's emotional problems, to which Curtis did experience many emotional problems, as was defined within the record from various organizations, from the psychological report that was conducted on Curtis that indicated that he did suffer from some emotional and behavioral problems that were failed to be addressed by the school district or by the area education agency. There are a variety of applicable laws, but the ones that really stuck out the most to me that I felt like really were important to this case are kind of laid out here, and there are four of them. The first is that school districts could not expel a student without disabilities. This means that they would be denied FAPE. It's actually one of the first cases that was um, ruled on nearly 14 years before this particular case. The second is the removal of students by the school for more than 10 days. This could not be accomplished without some type of a court order. Um, the next is students may not be expelled if misconduct is a manifestation of their handicap, which really wasn't addressed in Curtis's particular case, his handicap or any type of manifestation report that obviously did not occur. And a change in placement requires reevaluation. It's pretty clear that the school unilaterally acted in this case to change or to influence Curtis's placement, and never at any time was the IEP ever reviewed to determine if there were behavioral manifestations involved in this situation. My personal response, really, I just kind of felt like Curtis was lost to a pretty overloaded system, and there's a lot of comments that are made in here by Judge Bartlett regarding some of the issues of being really kind of overworked and overburdened system that's generally pretty highly underfunded. Um, Part of this, though, can't be explained away. A lot of this is just simple negligence and trying to unload a student who had a behavioral problem um, and a school district that refused to really and fully address this behavioral problem. So there's really just a lot of different breakdowns here, breakdowns in communication, failures of kind of the bureaucratic systems that have been put in place too to try and deal with students with IEPs and their behavioral problems. Um, so this negligence, along with that, can definitely be pretty problematic. Implications for school leaders, there's a few of them. School leaders would be wise to collaborate with other members of the administrative team to determine appropriate action in dealing with discipline. Also, just creating a clear and comprehensive support to be put in place to address behavior concerns at all levels of the staff. Um, Anybody that comes into contact with students, it would be really wise to make sure that there's kind of a preventative measure put into place so that these behaviors just don't escalate to the way that they did. That really results in ultimately and most importantly the failure to the student. School districts should also consider the overall review of student disciplinary action. Maybe get some outside eyes on what you're doing as a district from a discipline perspective, especially in dealing with students with disabilities. Just a couple of questions. What supports would you, as a principal, recommend to fellow principals and staff in your district to help with de escalation? And also, how would you engage stakeholders in the development of comprehensive programs to address school discipline?